Well, Happy New Year and welcome to a new episode of Hockey Talk. I'm Dave Dawson on HN Live. Thanks so much for joining us. Really excited to be back for the first episode of 2021. On HN Live, we broadcast a high-quality streaming of amateur and minor sporting events and leagues as well, and tournaments, a couple of tournaments that we've been partnering with over the years. Been very excited to broadcast those, have been the Stampede Challenge and the Champions Cup. Yeah, you probably heard of those. They've featured a number of NHL stars over the years, and today we get to talk to the founder and the president of both of those, the CEO of Big Sky Fitness, Brian Strong, and his son, the president of Chance Consulting, Matt Strong. Guys, thanks so much for joining us. I really appreciate having you on, and Happy New Year. Why don't we start with Matt, I guess. First of all, Matt, tell us about the Stampede Challenge. What exactly is the Stampede Challenge for those who have been hiding under a rock and have never heard of it before?
Our go-to line to explain the Stampede Challenge has been that it's Calgary's largest and most historic spring hockey or youth spring hockey tournament. It goes every single year, traditionally on the very first weekend of June, kind of to wrap up the spring hockey season. The Alberta Champions Cup is the other tournament that we run at the beginning of the spring hockey season. It started about 10 years after the Stampede Challenge, and it runs every single year at the last weekend of April, which is kind of the beginning of the spring hockey season.
And a strong tournament, pun intended, with family roots as well. Bridger and Slater, the brothers involved in that as well. And Brian, the founder of that as well. Sorry, guys, love my dad jokes and I love my puns. Anytime I can find a chance to pop one in, another pun intended there, then the big sky is the limit. So, Brian, why don't we go right to you, and let's dial the clock back to 1993 and when this all got started. What was that process like to getting the roots going all the way back to the early 90s?
Well, Dave, actually, I can't take all the credit. The tournament, actually, Stampede Challenge back in '93 was started by Kelly Bruce out of Airdrie, and then we ended up when I and an ownership group started National Sports Development that became known as NSD. We ended up taking over that tournament from Kelly at a certain point where he was looking to sort of exit that. So then we took that over, and it fit really hand in glove with everything that we were doing with player and athlete development with NSD. So, and then as soon as that had happened, then a couple gentlemen that had just started the Alberta Champions Cup had got the thing launched off, but it was running between Calgary and Edmonton. So they approached us, and again, we took that, and again, that fit in. And because we were very involved in spring hockey and tied in and had deep roots into Calgary and actually had good connections throughout Western Canada, it just was a natural fit for us to take the tournaments and to try and take them to the next level. But both the parties that had started those two, respective tournaments really did a good job getting it built up, and then we just took it from there.
All right. I love the humility and the backstory on that. That's fantastic. And family, when it gets to family business and family dynamics, there are a number of people that run family businesses, and there's so many things that are special about that. Brian, let me toss it back to you again. What's that been like to build this program up? As you mentioned, it's been handed off, and incorporate your sons in that as well.
Well, I mean, when we started, like I said, the ownership group that started NSD all started because it was a group of fathers that all had kids in various sports. And the primary sport was hockey. So literally NSD got started with about 12 dads and 12 other kids. And we started this spring hockey group, and it just took off. It just grew legs, and it was like a rocket ship. And we never really intended it initially to go that way. So then that migrated, then, Matt being my oldest son, I mean, he came through, and then everybody else, I've got 4 boys, and they all followed through, and so did a lot of the other, and then obviously the network grew and grew. So to see them go through their hockey careers, to follow them around with their hockey careers has been very, very rewarding. It was a great part of my life, and now they're on the older side, or maturing and becoming young adults, and being able to pass it off. And it was a good transition point, because I'm a little bit more out of the hockey circles now, where they are still highly involved and connected. So it was just a natural transition.
Now, Matt, a question for you, I guess. What did that mean to be, mentored by your father through that, and now be in charge to take over this great engine that has become this massive entity? And part one of that question, the other part of that, do you remember kind of growing up, being raised up in the tournament, and what kind of impact did that make into the man you are today?
Well, the hockey in general has played a huge role, had a huge effect on my life in many facets. But being a part of the tournaments, like going and playing in the Stampede challenges as I was a kid, actually, excuse me, I'll even back that up. I remember going to watch Stampede challenge games before I was even at the age of really playing in them, to go see players like Gilbert Brulé and Dan Bertram and Ryan Getzlafs. They were phenoms at that young age already playing in those tournaments, and my dad would take us out to go watch them play. So my first taste happened well before I even played in the tournaments. And then I got to play in the Stampede Challenge, but not the ACC. All my brothers, or the three of them that played hockey, or three of us that played hockey, sorry, all played in the tournaments at some capacity. And, so now since then, it's almost come full circle. We've got to see, there's groups of our friends that have gone on to have professional careers down in the NHL and all across North America and over in Europe. And we've had the opportunity that we've now kind of gone to the university, and we've come back, and this is an opportunity to stay involved in hockey, but also bring in a business side of it, I guess.
And on the business side, both of you are very professional men in the business community. And Matt, we'll only toss it right back to you. And we had joked kind of before recording that with your junior hockey career, you've had the opportunity to see a lot of Canada, and it's also built relationships. Now, we'll tie that into, playing in the Stampede Challenge and the opportunity to make those business relationships. I mean, how much greater did that build that opportunity for you to become the man that you are today, as I mentioned before?
Obviously, I don't think I could probably put words to it to say exactly how big of an impact it did, because almost like every time I think back on it, I see how much it affected or played a role in so many different facets of my life. So being able to have the tournaments like this that are such a good showcase, but they're also such a fond memory. Like, I look back when I've played in the Stampede Challenge and Alberta Champions Cup when I was little. You don't necessarily remember individual games, but you remember the experience in the tournament and your team. Like, there's something special about going through those, like a round robin and then into playoffs and potentially playing 6 games in 4 days. That is a ton of fun for the kids, and probably a lot of hockey watching for the parents. So they got to really like it too, and obviously a big commitment for them. But all of that, like, it's just little drops in the bucket that eventually allowed me to pursue a dream to go play hockey in the Western League and then onto the AJHL, and I was able to turn that all around into a university education at Mount Royal, which I think in a lot of ways I'm very fortunate for the avenues that it guided me through and the people I got to meet along the way.
All right, so Brian, this tournament, as we've talked about before, is branched out right across. And if you look at some of the countries, it's not just in Canada and the US. It's branched out all over the world. Was there a spot, and was your involvement in there to kind of, okay, now we got a team from the Czech Republic coming over? Like, what was that like to watch this tournament start to grow legs and build and blossom out into this massive entity? And had it already been built before, I guess?
Sorry, Dave. Yeah, no, thank you. It's a great question. We really had focused, primarily it started, obviously its roots were in Calgary and Alberta, and then Western Canada, grew very, very quickly through Western Canada. Then it was pretty big to get some Eastern teams, which we then did. And then we moved into the US because, I have a fair amount of connections on the US. We got some US teams, but the whole move, or the progression to get some teams from Europe and across the other side of the pond was all Matt.
All right, well, Matt, tip of the hat to you on that one, I guess. That's fantastic. So I was going to ask a question to both you guys. Maybe just a quick comment on the connections there, and being able to bring in connections from across into Europe. But I definitely want to ask you, you mentioned Ryan Getzlaf and watching some of those players play at a young age. And Brian will toss that question to you after, to Matt. So Matt, why don't we go with you first? First of all, just those connections to be able to go overseas and bring some of those teams in, and as you mentioned, probably to do with your connections as well from playing hockey. And then the other half of that is any memories of your Ryan Getzlafs at a very young age.
Okay. Well, I'll start with Ryan. Like Ryan Getzlaf, I remember specifically because he was obviously somebody I looked up to when I was younger. He was all over the 7-Elevens. He had his big blown up body, life-size cutout was in the 7-Elevens within his Hitman jersey. And I would get to see him that guy that's in the 7-Elevens, I'd see him at the gym every single day. And also we got to see the time and the effort, like the level of dedication it took to become a professional at his trade. And this is just what he was at the Western League, and eventually became onto an NHL player. So you really get to see what it takes. I have an idea that it's not just all skill. Like obviously skill plays into it, but the time that is put in behind the scenes that not everybody sees all the time. I was very fortunate to have a facility where players, very, very reputable and very strong hockey players, would come train, and you have to see those what the habits that they brought into the gym every day, and their commitment to themselves and improving themselves on and off the ice. So that was, I think, really eye-opening and an opportunity that I don't think a lot of other people would have just had available to them. So I was very fortunate for that. And then going into the question about overseas, I guess, having connections in hockey and then playing on a few teams last year, specifically before everything happened with COVID, like we were in discussion. We had teams coming from Czech Republic that were returning for the second straight year. And we'd also had teams that were going to be coming from China. And I had friends that were playing professional hockey over in Europe. And so I was able to navigate through them to speak to these programs and these teams on their time zones, because it doesn't necessarily always line up. And it also was really neat for those teams to be contacted by somebody that was playing professionally in Europe and trying to get them to come overseas and try the North American style hockey game. And then I just looked at it as for the kids that are now playing in the Stampede Challenge and the ACC, that they'll remember the time that they were 9 or 10 years old when they played Team Czech Republic or a team from China. Like those are not. It's not the same as playing the community that you've played every year of your life. It's a very unique moment, something special that you'll look back on very fondly.
Now, Brian, I imagine that obviously we mentioned off the top the 3 brothers involved, the whole family involved as part of this process. And listening to Matt and the successful young man that he's become and talk about his different connections probably makes you a proud father. And there's a lot of work to be put in. You talk about teams in Czech Republic and in Europe, and it's not just your 10-team minor hockey tournament in Calgary and Airdrie. This is a big undertaking. Now, what's that been like to watch, as you mentioned, the kind of handoff with Bridger and Slater and all these guys kind of have an involvement in running this process as well?
Well, it's been very rewarding to it was a big challenge. They took it over, but I think because they've been involved so long and they had participated in the tournament, they worked in the tournament when they were, or worked running around the tournaments, then playing in the tournaments. I think it's just been a natural progression. It's just one of those things. They've been around it their entire lives. But then they've all gone to university and school, and they've been able to sort of take it, and they still have a passion for sports and for hockey in particular, and to take it. And they've really done a good job. And I've watched the things that we wanted to do, but again, when we had the tournaments, it was part of a number of companies and entities that I was managing and overseeing. So we never really got sometimes to do all the things like maybe to go internationally. And so Matt and Bridger and the boy, they've been able to do that and to take it to another level. And I think, probably the biggest thing and most unfortunate was this past year watching the tournaments both not being able to operate, and to watch all the work and the time and the effort that they put in. And I mean, difficult circumstances, and not just for them. I mean, for all the parents, the teams, the coaches. I mean, it was just such an unfortunate thing to watch, but to watch them have to deal with, everything pulled out from underneath them, and then have to deal with just literally thousands of parents, and how they dealt with it, and how they communicated, and how they own, they did everything they possibly could. And I'm very, very proud how they handled that through this past year.
Broadcasting often works in segues, and that's where I was going next. So thanks for putting things on a tee there. And Matt, I guess, well, yeah, COVID has impacted all of us. There isn't one person in this world that can say they haven't been impacted by it in some way or another. So why don't we dial the clock back to March 2020? It seems like yourself, Corey, and I spent hours on the phone for the months prior, and we were less than a month, just over a month away from the Champions Cup and, of course, Stampede Challenge. Take us back, Matt, to 2020 and to March, and when you found out that things had the plug pulled, and what that process was like for you.
It was startling. It happened actually very, very fast, because I remember being in mid-February where you started to hear a little bit of discussion about COVID, but it hadn't really fully landed in North America or had the same impact yet. And at the time, the only thing we were seeing is, the year before was our first year really running the tournaments ourselves. And so we looked at this year being, this is our first year where we can really have an effect of the time that we put in, and some of the things we tried to improve on from the year past, and from the feedback we got from teams, and everything up until that point was looking amazing. We were actually on pace with both of those tournaments to be completely sold out. We were going to have our highest registration levels in terms of number of teams attending both tournaments that we've ever had. We were on pace to have a great year. And then in the span of what felt like 14 days, it all went from turmoil to uncertainty to it's not going forward, but we don't know if it'll be moved a couple weeks and we'll be able to run a week or two later or 3 weeks later. And it brought on a lot of circumstances that it's such a token word now, is called unprecedented, but it really was something that really hadn't been seen before. So you were trying to adapt on the fly, but still do it in a professional manner, but then also have to be cognizant of all the families that could be potentially attending your event. So everything we did was trying to understand what is the best course or navigate forward, I guess. What made it even more difficult was that one of the big outcomes that we'd learned from the year prior was that we could actually make our operations a lot more efficient by having our apparel orders and medal orders and all those quantities done almost 6 to 9 months before the tournaments run. And by doing that, we could save a lot on shipping and also have more product to be able to offer players and teams, and have better little welcome gifts that all the players love. And we were really excited for that, so that we'd had that all basically out of the way before February was even done. Whereas the year before, we were a month before the tournaments is when we were putting these player gifts together. And so we thought all of this is out of the way. We freed up so much time leading up to the tournaments to make this more streamlined. And I think even with the broadcast schedule, we went from the year prior doing scaffolding up in Edmonton with you guys to the last year we're going to have you guys doing live broadcasts on a full seat, full bowl facility with a jumbotron that was going to be broadcasting the game, so players could see play-by-play replays. The whole experience, we were looking to everything that we're trying to do with the tournaments is build an experience, and everything was tracking towards us being able to see some noticeable improvements and really start to have a mark. And that all really got thrown into limbo. And not even limbo, that all got really just thrown out.
Yeah, can't even imagine what that must have been like. So you go from there to gathering the staff and say, how do we alert everybody? How do we get that message out? And then must be a difficult process to not knowing, okay, are we going to be doing it again later? How does one even navigate that as the guy on top to puppeteer that?
It was very tough, because a lot of our ice deposits had already been made, and so we were looking at a situation where we might not be able to run our events. Our deposits on ice have already gone out, and if they're not going to run, then we need to, when we get that money back, so we can start refunding teams or pushing it back to teams. But while COVID was kind of like developing through those months, the narrative and what we were being told from even health officials at the time was they were still learning about what was happening. They didn't know if we were going to be canceled or if we would be able to just run maybe a month later or 2 months later. And so the facilities in that case are hesitant to shut everything down and refund us because it's not all's not lost yet. But then on the same time, we start getting contacts from teams, like some of our American teams, like they're asking if they're going to be able to get across the border. Even some of our Canadian and local teams that are now have concerns about just that many people gathering in one spot. And even if we were allowed to go forward, they weren't sure if they wanted to assume that risk. And facing that situation of something that we never really had seen before, of what do we do in that situation, and it just became difficult because a lot of it came down to the timing of when we could get money back to teams that paid their registration fees. Because it's no secret that hockey is a very, very expensive sport to play in. So getting money back to teams in a timely manner was an important thing for us, but it was also really, really hard to achieve because it was, for lack of a better word, it was something we hadn't really had to go through before. So we were navigating very, very troubled waters, almost blind. But I think to try to frame it in a positive light, I do think there's a lot of positives that we've taken away in terms of areas that we can learn from, prepare for better, probably stipulate even stronger, like our wording in what is going to be refundable, or how even our ice deposits are held in security. I think COVID will have an impact on so many different business industries. Are going to revamp ways of operating and what is standard operating procedures, and ours is no different.
Yeah, that's a lot in there. And Brian, I want to get your take just on obviously the physical fitness side of that. As the CEO of Big Sky Fitness, and those in Calgary very familiar with that name, a number of gyms operating in that area. And you get on the physical side of it, where some of the players, you're starting to COVID loosens up a little bit, and you're getting involved in getting people back in action again, and just having the mental health side of it, and just the importance of that. We're navigating through staying physically fit and positive, I think, is where I'm going with that. Is there are a lot of different ways that you can process, as Matt mentioned, taking positives out of this. How has the physical fitness, and you've seen athletes being able to cope with that on the physical side, how is that, what's that been like to watch that as someone who's involved in the fitness side?
Yes, no, it's you never intentionally take anything for granted, but when the COVID hit and we were shut down, I mean, you just don't realize, you can still go outside, you can do some of those things, but when you're a young budding athlete, and even after your post-athlete career, people are. It's almost their workout is for some people, it's their religion, and they're very dedicated to it. They're committed to it. And when you're an athlete, you love being in the gym. Most athletes enjoy training, getting better, pushing their boundaries and improving. So, that was just heightened when, after the first shutdown, that everything got reopened. We were just flooded, and then we have to monitor and make sure that everybody's COVID friendly and social distanced, and we had to make sure all the equipment's being sanitized and decontaminated, every hour. So those little things came in, but the athletes were more focused, more appreciative that, because nobody had ever really lost their place to train before. So everybody was just, it was a real groundswell of positivity and just a very dynamic, energetic environment. So, yeah.
Well, as we prepare for the Stampede Challenge and the Champions Cup coming up this year, I think, sponsorships, you talk about the sponsors that have helped step up and make these dreams come to life. Matt, without having to list the whole list of sponsors, both of you gentlemen, I guess, if you like to talk a bit about your personal businesses and the impact of sponsorships, if you want to tap on a couple of them as well.
Well, for this year, what's really transitioned is the area for sponsorship is almost dried up, but what's really come about and been become even stronger and now is almost, I look at it as going forward is probably even more important in sponsorship is having strong partners that we work with. Like having our relationship that we have with HN Live and Edmonton Economic Development is another a partner of ours that has been immensely helpful in helping us navigate a lot of uncertainty. And for this year, going forward, we have a partnership with a company called Go Thrive Fundraising. What they actually work on, or what they are able to provide, is a platform for teams that register in our tournaments. They can sign up for free with Go Thrive, and they can fundraise and sell raffle tickets to their friends and family into a draw prize that's all across Canada. And that by doing that, the proceeds from all the raffle tickets, portion of it goes back to the team to help subsidize registration fees. It doesn't have to necessarily be for our tournament either. It could be for transportation costs or anything, just anything to lower the financial burden on families and spread it out a little bit, give teams an opportunity to fundraise the registration fee. I think is going to really help us be able to attract the teams in what is obviously a competitive environment. And at the same time, it also allows us to start to prepare a bit more for what the tournaments are going to look like in a post-pandemic or post-COVID environment, and how people are going to be gathering. And it's been a lot of planning for that, but we're excited on what we have in store for this year. We're planning next week to have announcements on how we're going to be accepting teams on a reservation basis. A lot of teams that were going to attend last year have credits that they'll be able to use, and on the reservation basis, it'll be no financial commitment to teams. It'll be more for us to be able to plan how many, if we are allowed to operate and go forward, how many teams are planned to attend. And by not having that financial commitment, we're making it a little bit easier on teams, and are able to wait until we have approval from health authorities to run, that we know we can run, before actually taking any financial commitment from teams. Just because if one thing is seen across so many different families, is everything's very, very tight right now.
For sure. Now, Brian, obviously, when hockey gets going again, the Big Sky Fitness is going to see an influx of a lot of athletes coming in there for sure. Maybe for those who aren't familiar, and New Year's resolutions, perfect time to get your budget ready and maybe start thinking about heading to the gym. What is so special about the business that you have built, and maybe for those who are unfamiliar?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, Big Sky sort of migrated, sort of morphed from NSD, so it's sort of come full circle. So, well, we still definitely have a sports performance component to Big Sky. It's just inside of Big Sky, and Big Sky is a little bit more positioned for the general marketplace as well. And then inside of that, we've got our sport performance department, if you will. So we've got our sport performance coaches. And so whether it's an athlete, I mean, it's a little bit different than the general public, be it, people my age or a lot younger than myself, but everybody comes in there and they're usually focused. They're in a place that they want to be. So we want to make, our goal always has been that when they're there, we want that to be one of the best hour and a half points of their day. And, I've been doing this for quite a while, and I've got the best senior management team and overall staff that I've ever had in the history of the company. And our members are just so energetic. They're understanding. I mean, and through this whole COVID, I mean, our whole company became closer, and there's just such a good vibe. So it's just a great place to come to every day.
All right, so this Champions Cup coming up, April 23rd to 25th, I believe, Matt, and Stampede Challenge June 4th to 6th. I'm not sure if those are totally confirmed. Found those on the website there, but that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Maybe just some information for people who are looking at, as you mentioned before, reserving spots, and some information for people who want more of it.
Yeah. So what we'll be rolling out next week is it'll be a very similar registration process to any team that has attended before. You'll be able to register online. The only difference is when you go to checkout, there won't be any money taken off a credit card. If teams have an event credit voucher or a credit from last year, which is balances we weren't able to refund at the time, they're able to put the voucher code in there. So we are able to start planning on how we're going to process all of that so when the time comes. And then it gives us a bit of an idea of how many teams would like to attend. So it'll be, like I said, the same process that teams are used to. They'll be able to go through our website. It'll just be more of a reservation until we find out from Alberta health authorities tell us that we can for sure go forward. And then at that point, then we can say that, okay, now that's a non-refundable deposit. We are going to have costs that we are going to incur. And at the same time, as soon as we get approval from Alberta Health, that's with all of our ice contracts this year. They're basically all on hold too. Like we have the ice confirmed that it's ours to use, but we don't have to make any deposits on that until we know for sure that we're allowed to go forward. So it's been a lot kind of developing on how we were going to work this through, because it just didn't. We wanted to be able to start opening registration to allow or to see how many teams are interested in coming. Like what is the appetite for spring hockey, and we anticipate being very strong with the possibility of our tournaments being possibly the very first tournaments that people are allowed to attend in over a year, which would be a really great opportunity for us. And we want to make the most of that by making the whole process leading up to that, if there is uncertainty in it, is as painless as possible and just transparent as possible. And that's going to be facilitated through, like, as I mentioned before, our partnerships where we have different offerings that other tournaments aren't able to have or might not have per se, which is teams being able to fundraise their registration fees and lessen that financial burden. And it also allows more versatility for different teams that might not have been able to attend before that might now have that opportunity. And I guess the other thing with the fundraising is that it has a component of a portion of all the sales goes back to Kidsport Calgary, who is our charity partner that we've dedicated to for this year. And that's, I think, is a really, really neat initiative of ours. By teams fundraising their own registration, they're able to make their spring hockey season a little bit more financially affordable, but at the same time, a portion of those proceeds are also going back to benefit Kidsport Calgary, who do so much in the local hockey community in terms of getting equipment out and to families that might not be able to afford it, and having access to ice and access to athletics. That is really where all of this is kind of ties back to, is that we have a love for the sport, and if we're able to do anything, a small part to help it grow, then that's what we're absolutely going to do.
Strong opportunity to grow into a better person over the years, definitely. So me and my partner, sorry, I can't resist that one. Guys, we've had a great interview today. I thought we'd end it with a little bit of fun. All right, so we'll ask Dad first of all. So Brian, Matt scored his first WHL goal in 2007. Do you remember watching that game and your reaction?
I believe it was with the Everett Silvertips. I believe. And I think I was there. I was there for it, beer in hand. And as they say, a blind dog always finds a bone once in a while.
Well, it's a little bit of father-son relationship without some ribbing, right? Okay, so Matt, you played 92 games in the dub. Yes, that game for Everett was against who? And who did you score it on?
I believe it was Tri-City Americans, and I don't think it was Carey Price, as much as I wish that would have been the case. The reason I even actually know it's Tri-Cities is because I have the puck sitting right in front of me. It's my office. It's my Everett was a first-class organization. I was so lucky to be drafted there and the people I met. But when I scored my first goal, like my idea was I would keep the game puck, but they actually have it mounted on a plaque. They have a date and the outcome of the game. So yeah, I remember that first goal, and I remember being in with Everett, it was such a neat place to play because I was obviously brand new to the Western League, and prior to that I was playing in Notre Dame. So I went from a school of about 110 people to an arena that was packing in 7,000 people every single night, it felt like.
September 21st, 2007, you scored it on a guy whose brother's name is Calvin. Played a lot of games in the NHL.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
That's actually who I was going to say. But I thought Carey Price is the more famous one, so if I could get away with that, I'd try.
Well, we'll omit that from the interview. That's what we'll go with. It was on Carey Price. Okay, Dad. Okay, Dad. Matt was drafted in 2005 by Everett. Do you remember the moment that? Obviously, many people have their theories that oh, it's not the NHL, but WHL draft is still special. Do you remember that moment that Matt got picked by the Silvertips in 05?
I do, because I was sitting in my office at National Sport Development, and there was 3-4 dads all sitting in the office, and I think we might have been having a coffee, and we were all watching the screen and just watching to see where our kids might possibly go, and they all ended up going. So it was a special moment.
Where were you, Matt, when you got picked?
I was in math class, in grade 9 math classes. I remember a teacher, her name was Miss Brewer, and she had to put up with a lot that day because we were at the Edge School at the time, was the team I was playing on. And so our entire team was in that class. And of course, the draft was on that day. So everyone was on like their computers or some form of internet, not paying attention to the class at all, just waiting to see where people got drafted. And the first one in our group off our team was Tyler Myers. And I remember him just jumping up and being out in the hallway and everyone celebrating and being happy. And it was a neat day. When you look back on it, it's the like you said, it's a WHL draft. It's not the end all be all. It's just a small stepping stone. But at the time, it was a really special experience, and to be able to share it with so many of our teammates was even better.
Tyler Myers, another guy who's played in the Stampede Challenge before. Braden Point, we talked about him as well. Taylor Hall, can't forget that one. All right. Okay, let's get into some more fun stuff. Between the two of you guys, we'll start with Dad. Who's got a bigger bench press, or maybe even all of your family members?
Well, if we can go back 30 years, hands down me.
Yeah, that's true.
Matt, what do you think? Yeah?
Yeah, that's he's a former football player, so they're built to bench press like cement trucks, and hockey's you gotta be a little more agile.
510 pounds.
Yeah, no, I would be lucky to have ever squat that. So maybe now I might win. Definitely against my brother, so I'll never concede there. But back in the day, for sure, Brian would have had me.
Brian, who whips up a better barbecued steak out of all the family members?
Matt. Oh, actually, you know what? I'll take that. Matt, I'd say Marshall. I'd say our second son, Marshall, is he's sort of the Chef Boyardee. Yeah.
All right. Who was the hardest slap shot of all the guys?
Matt.
Yeah. That was
no work here, buddy.
Do you want to ask who the best skater was?
Yeah, that may not be the best answer.
All right. What was the next one here? This question for Dad. How many collective trips to the hospital growing up from sibling tussles? Do you have a number you can round up to?
I should have taken shares out in Alberta Health. Matt alone, Matt, I think there's a ward up at Foothills Hospital named after him, I think. So, I don't know how many broken arms, broken leg, broken wrist. We've been frequent users of the Alberta healthcare system.
All right, a couple questions left here. Which guy, go for Matt, is most likely to keep his New Year's resolution?
I think Brian this year. 2021 is the year. He's committed to his health.
All right, Matt, why don't we go with what's one piece of advice you'll never forget that Dad told you?
Things will come to those who wait, but only what's left from those who hustle. I actually have it on a sticky note. I keep that little memo as a little reminder all the time, just as a reminder to myself that there are always going to be people who might be more skilled or better at something naturally. But if I put in the most that I can day in, day out, those drops in the bucket will eventually lead to that tipping point where you see the success. And there's no other way to get there other than through hard work and hustling.
All right, I'll end it with this one, Dad. Your proudest moment as a father?
I got 3 kids to choose from. 4.
I got 4. I think it sounds so cliche, but it would be the birth. The birth of all the boys. Each one was so special and very fortunate. They've all grown up to be good young men, and I think positive contributors to society. And so we keep pressing forward. So that would be my proudest point.
All right, well, we'll keep press on forward and hope that we'll be back to the Stampede Challenge and Champions Cup this year. Wouldn't that be an absolute treat? Looking forward to all the great things that HN Live is going to partner up with you guys and bring to the table. Hey, guys, thanks so much for making some time this weekend to talk a little bit of hockey. And man, I am looking forward. I know I can speak on behalf of everybody. Looking forward when we can get back to hockey again. Thanks so much, guys. Really appreciate your time. And thank you for watching this episode of Hockey Talk. Be sure to follow us on social media, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, hnlive.ca. And yeah, we cannot wait when we get back in the booth and broadcast some hockey. On behalf of Corey and Larry and Calvin and Sean, our HN Live broadcast team, I want to say thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next time.